then I thought that for the benefit of the audience, we might want to, that maybe you could give a definition. We could start a basic definition of stem cells, different types, right? Different types of stem cells, many flavors, to your point, right? And truly what you said is right on the mark. There is such a lack of...
It doesn't mean anything. What does it mean?
Even my organization, we're guilty, but we're changing that right now, okay? So there's a way to frame what even some of the talking points that I just said, there's a way to frame that up. And right now in the stem cell education space, it's hard to go, you get the full picture. You can learn about what stem cells are, but it's not all the complexity of the ecosystem the ecosystem that's going on. So maybe you could just give a brief definition of stem cells and some of their applications. And I have a list of some advancements in stem cells, and I can share some of those just so there's more of a context of understanding of stem cells and where the progress is being made.
And I think a really good place to start is the NIH, National Institute of Health, has an excellent website that starts at the very basic level, and it's written for people who are non-scientists. So it's very clear in defining stem cells. So for instance, for you, it would be a great place to go is the NIH website, and it really defines what stem cells are basically and all the different types of stem cells.
Are there major categories like what's adult versus embryonic versus pluripotent?
Number one, stem cells are all over. They are in every phase of our life. From the embryo, of course, and everywhere in our bodies. There's stem cells from fat, there's stem cells from bone marrow, of course, that you work with every day. There are stem cells all over our bodies. Stem cells basically are undifferentiated cells, cells that do not have a final function. A heart cell, for instance, has a very specific function. A brain cell has a very specific function. A stem cell does not. They're undifferentiated cells that essentially are frozen in time, waiting to become something else. And there are a number of different signals or cues that can move stem cells into a mature type cell, a brain cell or a heart cell, for instance. But there, as Dennis was saying, there's a lot of different categories. Embryonic stem cell, I think, is probably the one that gets the most publicity. You hear about that a lot in the national media.
Causes the most hysteria.
Certainly, it gets a lot of people motivated either direction. It's taken from the blastocyst stage of an embryo, developing embryo.
And how old is a blastocyst?
Blastocyst stage is about 4 days or so old, and
I was going to, since we're on embryonic stem cells and blastocysts, which I think a lot of groups, be it Catholic or otherwise, that are quite concerned about. How many embryos right now are frozen throughout the United States that are going to be thrown away?
According to the American Fertility Society, there are about 150,000 embryos that are about to be destroyed in vitro fertilization programs. In other words, this is from people who were infertile. They went through the program and they were very successful in getting pregnant, and they cryo-stored their embryos, many of them in the blastocyst stage. Those will be sacrificed eventually because of the cost of storing them.
And the reason they have these extra embryos is because they take a lot of different eggs and fertilize them. They only take 1 or 2 of them, unless you're the octomom, they'll take more than that. And then we'll then insert those into the uterus for them to grow, but then if that doesn't take, then they have the frozen ones they can come back to and utilize. But once they have their children, then they don't need them anymore, and at that point they are literally flushed down the drain without any use whatsoever. So these are embryos that are produced by the in vivo fertilization system in our country that are being literally flushed away. So it's not as if we're trying to clone anything. They're already there that we're just going to throw away.
And isn't it more pro-life to care about the people who are already on Earth and who have been contributing citizens of the world, and then to let us, and I am not talking for me because I am 60 years old, and the cure won't come in time for me, but I am worried for my children. And that is why I am so urgent and why it is so important to me.
So, and it's a very valid question. I think something that needs to be discussed. To me, what I think is a waste is to be throwing out this material that's available. But that's only one type of stem cell. That's the embryonic stem cell.
That's right. The other big class is adult stem cells, and they come in all kinds of flavors. As I say, from the bone marrow, for instance, from fat tissue, from many different types of tissue in the body. Those cells are obviously less controversial. They are generated from a human embryo. And many of them are very easy to access. There's very easy access to those. We can, you collect them almost every day, what you're doing, but actually they're available. And they have a potency, meaning that they can convert into many different types of cells. And the more research we seem to do on these cells, the more powerful they seem. And especially from the concept that you can take it from a patient and transplant them back into that patient to treat a particular disease. It's a very exciting concept. It's called an autologous type model, where you can take those cells and transplant them back into a patient for a disease, for instance, a stroke, for instance, or replacing stroke, damaged brain cells, or heart, for instance. But that's a very big class of cells. Umbilical cord blood stem cells are another class of cells. They kind of fall between the crack between adult cells and other types of stem cells. And they're collected from many different types of tissues in the umbilical cord of the placenta. They're readily available. The frustrating thing I see is that a lot of these are just lost. Just like the embryonic stem cells, they're thrown out, and trying to get women to donate cord blood. The blood is taken from the umbilical cord after the baby is born. The entire thing is thrown out normally, but it is a rich source of stem cells. Just as an example, we'll take, in fact, we've taken blood from Dr. McManus, and he has a very small number of CD34 stem cells, is what we're looking for in our laboratory. They're the cells that make all of our blood cells that are floating around in our blood. The cord blood is filled with millions and millions of these. It's just a rich source. And trying to gain access to that material is very difficult for those of us in research many times, because it's difficult to get the material. David Leach, who just left, really was on the forefront with this in Illinois, and setting up legislation that required women to be at least told that they have the option to donate their cord blood after their pregnancy, after the birth. So that was a very big step, I thought, for Illinois.